Welcome to the 5th installment of Surviving Satchidananda. This is the podcast where we explore the dark side of Satchidananda Ashram Yogaville in Buckingham, Virginia. My name is Brianna Patton. Today we're continuing to explore what childhood is like living at this ashram. And to get a better understanding of what that's like, I am joined today by Forrest, who moved to Yogaville when he was very young. Forrest brings such valuable insight as someone who had their formative developmental years growing up in Yogaville. Forrest was homeschooled in a very isolated community, and today we're going to talk about how that can shape someone's life experience. When I was living at Yogaville and watching Forrest grow up, from my perspective, it always looked like he was just a very happy child. But in this conversation, I learned that there was a lot more underneath the surface that I didn't see. I am so grateful that Forrest shared his story with us, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Well, thanks, Forrest, for coming to talk to me today.
Yeah, of course.
How did you and your family first get introduced to Yogaville?
I believe my mom took a teacher training through integral yoga when I was about 2 years old, and then through that she learned about Yogaville, and we started visiting when I was about 3. And we came a couple times a year. And I started going to the camp when I was 8. And we moved there when I was 12, right after my parents got divorced. My mom just felt like it'd be the best place for her and the family, I guess.
So what were your initial impressions 3 years old is pretty young, but what are your first memories of Yogaville?
The first thing I remember is the farm stand. I loved just hanging out and eating the vegetables. When I was really little, I remember there was this big tree we used to climb.
Was it the pink one?
It was the pink one, the cherry blossom tree.
Yeah.
I can't remember much from when I was that young. I just remember thinking it was like a fun place to come hang out. And it was always like that sort of until I moved there. It sort of became a very different place.
What was different when you moved there?
You just kind of got taken into the culture more. You had to listen to their rules if you lived there rather than if you were just visiting. There was always a lot of secrecy that I remember, and just a lot of things that people wouldn't talk about or not let other people know about. It always felt weird to not know important things that were going on.
Did you have less rules, I'm guessing, before you moved there?
Yeah, you just didn't really know about the rules when you were first visiting. At least I didn't when I was that young. They weren't as strictly upheld because they don't seem to know you as well. They want you to feel more welcome, it seems like. But once we moved there were very strict dress code rules. I couldn't really wear shorts in the summer and would overheat because they wouldn't let us in the building if we weren't dressed right. And that was even just in the dinner hall, which was our only meal option. I remember even my little sister, she was 8, and she would have the dress code upheld to her too, which was very weird because it's not supposed to happen until you're 12, but she was more developed for her age. So they would use that as an excuse. But why would they be sexualizing an 8-year-old?
Yeah.
So that was very strange.
Yeah, I feel like dress codes usually targeted toward the girls more, and like you're distracting the boys and not teaching people how to engage with people respectfully.
Mm-hmm. I would always remember Bhagavan would just talk about how he'd have to look at some of the young men who would come to visit and be like, these are children. You should not be looking at them the way I see you looking at them. So it seemed like there was some issues with that going on potentially at some point.
And you remember hearing about that when you were very young?
When I was pretty young. When I was 12, there'd just be stories that were kind of laughed off, like of Bhagavan looking at young men and saying like, hey, not these girls.
How did you remember that making you feel?
I mean, I was already very aware of that type of thing at that age, so it sort of felt normal for me, I guess, that would be happening, but it shouldn't have been.
And what were your first impressions of the idea of Swami Satchidananda?
I, at a very young age, was told that I really liked him because I thought he was Santa Claus or something. And my mom would gift me these videos of him. But even at that age, the first thing that caught me was how the girls were dressed in like leotards without pants on in those yoga videos. Mm-hmm. But that's not how Yogaville seems to work now. But it still seemed odd to me. It caught my attention at that age. And once I moved there, I just kind of thought he was, their god, basically, which I grew up with Hinduism, so I sort of understood the notion of gurus, but I never believed in it personally. I just kind of was like, these people all have their beliefs. I think it's a little bit weird that they're doing this to a living human, but I just kind of tried to ignore it as best as I could, I guess.
And you were homeschooled, right?
I was. I was not wanting to go to the Buckingham school, and it was really the only option to kind of be homeschooled. When I was first moving there was a little group of us that were almost going to start the school up again for our ages, but we ended up just kind of doing more homeschool groups, which now, knowing what I do about the school, I think is for the better.
Mm-hmm. Because Yogaville's so isolated, did you ever get a sense that this life that you're living in Yogaville is different than what a lot of other people your age were experiencing?
Definitely. I mean, I kind of already grew up odd, like in an odd religion and homeschooled and everything, so I always felt like I was different from most people. I lived a different experience, but especially in Yogaville, it very much felt like there was Yogaville and then there was the outside.
What were your impressions of the outside world?
I was friends with some of the Buckingham boys. They were nice to me when I was that age, but there was always some teasing about, being weird Yogaville kids. But I didn't really experience the outside of Yogaville a lot. Even the kids that would live nearby, I think, just kind of thought we were weird or something, so they wouldn't want to hang out as much as, I don't know, I'd hope they would.
What were your experiences like at camp?
At camp, it was great when I was young. I remember it was my favorite thing every year. But once I got to a certain age, about 12, I think it was, when I moved there, it was just sort of different. Sarge, Rudra, Sam, all his names, was really great with young kids. All the young kids loved him. But it seemed like once you got older, he was different. And that's how I experienced that as well. He would have a bit of a temper that would come out even towards the young junior counselors, we would call them, especially towards the counselors. When I was older and experiencing him not being so great, he was still great with all the young kids. So it seems like, I don't know, he just can't deal with older people in some way. It seemed like there was a bit of a power thing with camp.
What kind of things would trigger Rudra to, I guess, get angry at kids?
Sometimes the way kids would be dressed, the same sort of shorts situation, showing your shoulders, bathing suits. I mean, I was young. I wouldn't want to be told what I could and couldn't wear. At that age, it felt weird to have my body looked at like that. There was just these little moments where I wouldn't really know what was going to set him off, and he'd just be frustrated to the point that it made it not fun.
At camp, did you confront Rudra about his behavior ever?
What I remember is during the end of camp, a bunch of the counselors and older campers got together and wrote a bunch of statements to try to basically get him removed from the position. We did not think he was in a place where he could continue with that role because of how he was treating everybody.
Do you remember about how many complaints you collected from kids?
I must have had at least 5 that I had collected personally. There was one thing that happened at camp. Not at camp. There was one thing that happened in Yogaville when I was 12. There was one of the they called the Yogaville pastors. The
ministers or
yes.
The reverends.
Yes, the Yogaville reverends. There was one of the children of the Yogaville reverends who sexually harassed a bunch of the Yogaville young girls when I was first there.
This was a male?
Yes, okay. It was. And it was a kid as well. Okay. Around our age, maybe a couple years older, but it wasn't taken seriously by anyone. I don't remember if we really tried to tell adults. I think we mostly tried to handle it on ourselves, on our own, because we didn't feel like anyone would take it seriously. And it was the kids who didn't grow up in Yogaville who handled it. The kids who grew up in Yogaville from birth were just trying to ignore it. And that stands out to me.
Mm-hmm. This was a kid that was harassing other kids?
Yeah, this kid was sort of asking for nudes and saying, I'll kill myself if you don't send me these nudes, trying to persuade these young people, including myself, into sort of being sexual with him. I think we were ages 12 to 15 I eventually told my mom about it like years later because my little sister was starting to hang out with this person, and I was like, this can't happen, and she ignored it. She let my little sister continue to hang out with this person, so that it makes me think no one would have taken it seriously. I don't really think we told administration. I think we just tried to handle it. I remember like beating this person up as a 12-year-old because they were trying to do this stuff to us, but yeah, I don't think we told anybody.
That's really brave for you to go kick this kid's ass.
There was lots of issues, like interpersonal issues with the kids there. I think the president of Yogaville's son was having a lot of issues at that age, like even trying to hurt my little sister, and he's older than me. And another person that I would have to take stuff into my own hands and physically hurt this person because they were trying to physically hurt my friends and making a lot of comments that were very inappropriate. And I just don't think that should have been happening. Like, I feel like they must have known this was going on. This was happening on Yogaville campus, sometimes in the multipurpose room, and they didn't do anything about it. And I know that this child, the child of the president of Yogaville at the time, was talked about, and nothing was really done about it. Like, there were meetings going on.
It seems like you really had to protect yourself from a really young age.
That's definitely how it felt. I had a lot of anger built up, so I was perfectly fine with being a little shit and also protecting my friends. I have mixed feelings about, having to physically hurt people as a 12-year-old because it was the only way that I felt safe.
Yeah, people should have been looking out for you.
Yeah, I feel like people had to have known something was happening, and they didn't protect us. They didn't do whatever they needed to do to make sure that wasn't happening.
Yeah, I wish I would have known that. You always just seemed like such a good little happy child. I didn't know all that crap was going on.
Yeah, it just sort of felt like stuff that you had to hide for some reason at that age. Like, I never really connected with a bunch of the people at Yogaville. I know some people would always make friends with older people there, and I always felt in some instances that could be weird.
Well,
but
in general, kids want to hang out with other kids their own age. You don't want to hang out with, a 20-year-old.
I definitely feel like I lacked other kids my age. There was 3 that were there regularly.
Is there anything else you remember about disciplinary things for the kids? Because it seems like with the dress code stuff, it seems like it's more to prevent the adult males from looking at these young girls.
It does seem that way. The discipline, I remember there was a whole meeting that was happening because we were skateboarding during the silent retreat, and one of the higher up members, I would call them, in Yogaville honked his car at us and yelled at us for just skateboarding because he said we were making too much noise, but it's funny because he's making more noise than us. But that was weird. Like, why would you have an entire meeting with the board of Yogaville to talk about these 4, I think, kids who were skateboarding fairly quietly? It just made us feel like we couldn't really do anything there.
It seems like a very constrictive environment to be a kid. It just seems like anytime you do any normal kid things, somebody's upset about it.
Yeah, that's how it felt. There was like the MPR, which was the multipurpose room, which was supposed to be for the kids to be louder in. But every once in a while, there'd be an older person who'd take it over and basically be like, all you kids need to get out of here because I want this space for silence. And then there wouldn't be anywhere for the kids to be kids. There was definitely some issues with the kids there, I would say, jumping on packages and stuff. But it was...
just normal kid stuff.
Yeah, it really was.
How did kids rebel?
Let's see. There was one time when someone told me I was using my crutches wrong. I don't even know. There was lots of trying to be superior figures over the children there. It felt like trying to make us feel smaller, just to kind of have control over us, I guess, more. So I would just take my crutches upside down and walk past her and ask, like, is this right now? Just like little stuff like that that's kind of, you can't really get in trouble for, but it's showing off that you don't like what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think I did actually throw kitchery cakes at someone's car once. I think that's because she took over the multipurpose room and yelled at a bunch of kids. I was definitely a little shit sometimes when I was there, purposely wearing like shorter clothing because I was upset about it. Just messing around and being kids, really. That's how we would rebel, is just being ourselves, because they wouldn't really let us be ourselves naturally.
Did you feel like you had a sense of belonging in the community? Like you had a support system?
I never really felt part of the Yogaville community, but I think my little sister did when she was there. And I know my mom, she loved the place until we lived there. She felt like she didn't have as much support as she would have liked moving there, single with 2 kids. She thought, this would be the best place to have all the support. It's such a close-knit community, but she didn't find that there like she needed. And I did not find that there when I was living there.
When did you end up leaving Yogaville?
I stopped associating with them when COVID started in 2020. I just did not go back onto campus. I lived a quarter mile from Yogaville main campus, and I just didn't go there for 3 years, I think it was. I just didn't want anything to do with the place. At that point, I'd heard enough of what had been going on that I would rather just stay home, even if that was sort of isolating for myself. The last time I went there, my friend and I got really high, and we invaded the kitchen and got a bunch of food and hung out there. And that was a really nice goodbye, I think, for the place. That was a couple years ago. But yeah, I don't really have plans with associating with that place anymore. I've moved out from the area 2 years ago.
What has your transition been like since leaving?
It's definitely been weird. I sort of feel like I've been learning things about the place that I had no idea were going on, and ways that the place has affected me mentally growing up in that environment. It definitely feels just so different from what my peers now experienced. I don't know, I definitely like some aspects of it, like the access to nature that I got when I was there, but I think that's the only positive aspect of growing up in that environment. Everything else was just odd.
You mentioned people telling you more things about the place that you didn't like. What kind of things were people telling you?
Finding out about the Sachidananda scandal and what he did to those women. Finding out about how the kids were treated at the school. Some of my friends, and then some of the even younger kids when I was living there. Just finding out about how they run the place. How they're trying to keep things silent that shouldn't be silenced.
This is interesting you're saying this, because a lot of people will say things like, oh, I went to Yogaville for a weekend or a month-long thing, and it was great. It's not bad at all. But you're saying you would go a lot as a child, and then as soon as you moved there, even your mom had a different experience. Once you're really in it,
yeah,
it's very different.
It is. It really is a different place when you live there versus when you are just a visitor. When you're a visitor, it can be a really great place. The scenery is beautiful. The people can be welcoming. The food can be to your taste if that's what you like. Personally, I struggled with having access to only Yogaville food, but it really is different when you live there.
And you didn't believe what your mom believed or was teaching you about religion and Swami Sachidananda? Is that accurate?
Yeah, she raised me Hindu. I went to temples. I went to India for a month, and that's what I was taught. A little bit different from the Yogaville philosophy, I would say, but I never believed in it. I just kind of thought of it how people sort of think of Santa now. It's something that can make people happy and bring positive things to their life, but also I think people can get a little too caught up and neglect some things that are important.
Mm-hmm. Since transitioning out of Yogaville, how has making friends been? Because at Yogaville, you just go in the dining hall and you kind of see people and hang out. How is making friends in a city?
For me, it's just been a positive experience to finally move to a city where there's people more like me. It's definitely been more difficult than Yogaville. With Yogaville, it's just sort of the people are there. You're kind of forced to be friends with them because they're the only people who are there. And I've definitely built some great friendships from that experience, but it's definitely made it difficult to know how to socialize in like the real world, it feels like. Especially being homeschooled, I never really had a real world experience. So I feel like the past 2 years finally living in the real world, and it's been very different, I would say. I find community going to shows because it's sort of a similar space where you all have a similar thing that you like and you're all kind of crammed in there together. I definitely think that Yogaville and the experience I have there nurtured me into liking that environment.
How old were you when you found out about Swami Satchidananda's relationships with women?
I must have been 16.
And what do you remember your reaction to that being once you learned that information?
I was definitely shocked because I sort of still held on to that little bit of him being special from my childhood. But once I learned more about Yogaville and how they responded to that, it all kind of clicked and made sense.
And how did they respond to that?
For as far as I know, just trying to shut it down and just silence everybody who's really talking about it. I haven't really associated with the place since then, but I see some stuff going on like the Facebook groups, different arguments and stuff, and stuff that's allowed to be talked about and not allowed to be talked about.
You said once you learned that things started clicking. What was clicking for you?
For me, just kind of what felt off about the place. Like I grew up feeling like the place was a little weird, but I kind of thought maybe it's just me. Like maybe it's not that weird. But once I found out about that, I just kind of learned more and thought about it more, and it all just kind of made sense how that place made me feel.
What would you say to parents who want to move their families to a place similar to Yogaville after you growing up there? Would you recommend something like that?
I think it can be done right, but it should be done with caution. Make sure your kids have access to the real world still, and they're not isolated, because that isolation really does affect you in life.
Did you feel like you were able to have those experiences on the quote-unquote outside?
I don't think I did. Once I was 16, I got my license and started living in the outside world a little bit, but before then, I was very isolated in Yogaville. I didn't really make friends outside of Yogaville very easily.
Mm-hmm. Would you have any questions for kids that grew up in Yogaville in the 80s and 90s or anything like that? Is there anything you're curious about?
I guess just sort of what their experience with the place was in general, how it affected them to this day, what aspects of it were nice, I guess. I'd still like to know that because I do still have some good memories from that place, some funny memories from that place. But I guess I'd just be curious what their experience was, how they feel it affected their life negatively and positively.
I remember when I was interviewing Chai, I realized that like myself and a lot of other people go to Yogaville when they're not doing very well or like they're having problems in their life. But there's also like this is where children are growing up here. A lot of the people that are drawn to Yogaville have some sort of issues. Did you pick up on that from an early age?
I definitely did pick up on that. I don't think I ever felt unsafe with anyone there, but I definitely noticed there were people having a lot of mental health issues around me, and caught on that, you know, this was a place that people would come to try to help themselves and sort themselves out. Sometimes they would end up staying for a long amount of time, and sometimes they would just disappear, and I'd never see anyone again.
Mm. You seem like you were looking out for a lot of people.
It felt like I was, but I had like the bad kid reputation because of it. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that's kind of one of the reasons I felt lonelier than I think maybe some of the other kids there did. I always felt like the parents didn't like me, at least when I was really young. You know, I'd understand if the parents of kids who I was physically beating up didn't like me, but, you know, maybe they should keep their kids from sexually harassing or physically assaulting other kids, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I never knew that you had that reputation. I just thought you were, like, very smart and bookish and just, like, a smart kid, so.
That's so odd. I definitely didn't feel like that, but I guess that's good to know, you know? I wasn't as thought of negatively as I thought I might have been. I never felt smart, especially being homeschooled. I felt like that sort of kept me from learning as much as I needed to, especially now. I don't feel as prepared for life as I really should, but there wasn't really another option there. So I don't really know what the right schooling option is for that place. Homeschooling is really isolating, but other places are unsafe.
Part of my conversation with Forrest reminded me of something I had read on the Cult Education Institute website. On that website, there's an excerpt from a book called Home Fires by Donald Katz. And when Forrest was talking about these restrictive rules, this quote came to mind. It says, "Dozens of one-time children of rock and roll sat down to make lists of offensive songs and television shows to be banned within Yogaville's borders. Soon after, dating between ashram children was banned through the end of high school. Then all children attending the ashram school were asked to sign a document pledging that they would not date, have sexual contact, listen to restricted music, or watch restricted television shows." That short excerpt describes Yogaville's school in the 80s, and from what Forrest was telling us, it seems like not that much has changed in terms of the restrictive rules and discipline at the ashram. And I find it so ironic that these adults who are putting these unnecessary restrictions on children and just not being very kind to them, taking time out of their day to have apparently board meetings about kids skateboarding, they're doing all this while their guru has been exposed to be a rapist. Maybe the Yogaville leadership should focus on that instead of kids skateboarding and wearing shorts in the summertime. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.